In my country, in Zimbabwe, perhaps I should just give a brief history of how I advanced from, well, after leaving university in Zimbabwe. I worked for the government and in several capacities, but the one that really was of interest to me was the period that I spent working in the Department of Legal Aid in the Ministry of Justice, and there I was exposed to, because the work involved giving legal advice and assistance to members of the public, and inevitably most of them turned out to be women with a whole lot of legal problems. At the same time, I'd started being involved in the women's movement in my country, and was asked in that capacity to go around the country talking about women's legal rights. It was an interesting period in our history because it was soon after independence, and the legal status of women, especially the African women, underwent drastic changes. But before that happened, people had to know what the situation was, and in order to recommend, to give their views on the past law and any suggestions for improvements and reform in the law. So I got very much involved in that at the same time that I was helping women in the Ministry of Justice. And then a year or so after independence in Zimbabwe, they set up a new ministry called Ministry of Women's Affairs and Development, and in setting up the various departments that would address various women's problems, they set up a Department for Legal Affairs, and I was actually invited because of the work that I had been doing up to that time. I was invited to set up that department. That was a very challenging responsibility and one that I enjoyed. So I was the Director of Legal Affairs there, and set up systems and programs to educate women about their rights, to not just women but other people as well, to advise governments on what types of laws they should pass to improve the lot of women, because at that time there was a lot of talk about improving the lot of women. This was after independence, and there was a lot of talk about women having participated equally with men in fighting the war, and it being unfair for them to come back to a situation where they were regarded as minors, as children, because that was the law then. African women were minors throughout their lives. They never attained legal age of majority. That was before independence. So that was one of the laws that we addressed, and so it was very, very interesting, and I really got involved in that. Traveled extensively around the country, and of course started being invited to other conferences and programs outside of Zimbabwe, like the Beijing Women's Conference. I attended that. I was still in the government then. So I did that work and enjoyed it very much for, I can't remember how many years, maybe 10 years or so. And then I thought perhaps I should leave for other fields. And I went back to the Ministry of Justice and did a bit of drafting and so forth. But I felt really my heart was with the women's issues, women's legal issues and rights. So when the Women in Law in Southern Africa a research project, Gwaunza, was being debated. It really originated with some law professors at the university there. I was roped in very, very early in the process and was involved in the negotiations to start up this regional organization. It involved 6-7 countries in Southern Africa, and it was a regional research project. And when the funds were made available, we set up offices in all these countries and appointed officers, full-time officers and part-timers who were drawn from the legal field and the social field. It's not just about the law, because there are so many factors that impact on a woman's lives that will affect how the law operates. And so the research that we did, or the research teams consisted of lawyers and social scientists. It was very interesting, very, very interesting combination, because we got the different viewpoints and perspectives. And so I enjoyed that work very, very much. And we would do one research subject at a time in all the 6 countries. There were 6 at the time, later on there were 7. All the 6 countries together would coordinate our efforts and plan the various stages of the research and formulate broadly the research questions and where to go to get the information, the research methodologies and what have you, and then we'd go back to our countries and fine-tune the research project so that it adapts to the local situation, and then we would start the research, and then we would get together again and talk about how do we process this research. Some people would come and talk to us and train us what methods to use to analyze the data that we got, and then go back to our countries and work again, and then we would start writing our reports, and that way we contributed a lot to data on women and the law. We looked at the law of maintenance first. The one research phase would take about 2 years or so. We did maintenance, then we did inheritance, because that's a big issue in our countries. We then looked at marriage and property, and then later on we looked at women's reproductive rights. And of course, along the way, we would be lobbying the government for changes in the law using our research results. So we would argue a point and use our research results to show to highlight the issue and to show exactly how it should be addressed. And that way, in our countries, in our 6-7 countries, Gwaunza influenced the reform of the laws in a very significant way. And I'm talking of the countries of Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, and Botswana, if I haven't mentioned it. Later on, Malawi joined. So, and at that time, and I was there for about almost 10 years doing that type of work, and then we learned one thing towards the end of that 10 years, that the government was no longer as fired up as it was at the beginning, and so we're saying, well, it's important. It was important for us to really hit while the iron was hot at the beginning, because we got a lot of reforms in the law. The Legal Age of Majority Act, in the reforms to the laws of property and inheritance and all that, we really played a part in influencing those changes. And then for a few years before I left Gwaunza, every year or so I was being approached to join the bench. I was not ready, because in Zimbabwe it's really by invitation. Okay. You don't go for an interview, you don't apply to the judge. It's from recognition of the work that you do. in the legal field, whichever sphere of the law you are working, and the Judicial Service Commission recommends your name to the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice approaches you. If you accept, then the process starts. So I turned them down, I think, for twice or 3 times because I didn't feel I was ready. And then when I felt I was ready, I joined the bench in 1998, and High Court. I was there for 2 years, and then I was promoted to the Supreme Court of Zimbabwe, which is where I was before I came here in 2008, and which is where I will go back to this year when I finish.
Okay.